Brother, I'm going run a wild Hulk Hogan. If all I get's a moment, I'll make sure it's an explosion. Cause lately I've been seeing stars, trying to kick out on this joy cord. But it's no holds barred, middle fingers like I'm Stone Cold.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is WeTooDeep. We are back with a special episode of the Slap and Mead Wrestling Podcast. As always, check the links in the description for our affiliate links to the WWE shop if you want to go out and get some of that new merch. Whether it's Murder City Machine Guns, the Golden Yeet shirt, anything from NXT, all your WWE merch. Go through the link in the description. Help me and Wavy D out with that. Also, if you're booking a trip, Expedia is the way to go. You can get your hotel, your airplane, your rental car, all of that all together on Expedia. Click the link in the description. You can book through that link, and again, we get a percentage of that purchase back to us. That'd be much appreciated. Another way you could help us is by getting us into the social media algorithms. Whether it's YouTube, which is really the big thing, or whether the podcast networks. Like, comment, subscribe, follow, share. Sharing's the most important, or one of the most important. Leave us reviews on, if you're listening on audio. But really sharing, reviews, and if you're on YouTube, commenting and liking, that gets us into the algorithm so that it is referred to other people who like content just like this. There's so many wrestling podcasts today, so much content being made that anything y'all can do to help, definitely. All it takes, doesn't even have to be about the episode. Just say hi, post something random in the comment box, click the like button. That will be helpful. Big shout out. We're now over 100 subscribers on the YouTube channel, which is big. Viewership, sort of behind the scenes thing. Not planned to talk about this, but sort of behind the scenes. I look at like the first really 36 hours of when a video goes up. So on Tuesday, with Tuesday's episode being posted real close to like Wednesday, I look at it after about 24 hours, and then after about 48 hours, right? And so after about 2 days, I have a feeling of what the how the feeling was. Are people interested in that episode? Is it in the algorithm, right? And so some episodes get 20 views in the first 2 days. Some end up with like 60 or 70. And for a channel with just 100 subscribers, that's to me, 70 views is kind of where I want to be at the moment. Obviously, I would love one of these things to go viral and to hit 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, right? But that's long-term goal, right? And so the best way to get there is not only by me figuring out how to share these things and get it out, but also for you guys just to help us get it into the algorithm. So with that, let's dive on in. I'm doing this episode solely because over the last 2 days, so I'm recording on Sunday, over Friday and Saturday, I've had some time, or really all day Saturday, I've had some time there's 3 topics, 3 things that I want to speak about that I can't wait till Tuesday with Wavy D because it really doesn't fit into the type of show we do there. It definitely is more suited for this style of show where it's just me sort of ranting on these topics, right? And so we'll start with the first one being the Motor City Machine Guns debuting, right? And as someone who is a casual fan, but also understands sort of the knowledge of the wrestling industry, I feel like I have the perfect viewpoint on how to view the Motor City Machine Guns debuting in WWE, right? Because you have the perspective of the hardcore wrestling fan, then you have the casual, I guess what we could label sports entertainment fan, and they have two very different perspectives, right? So the hardcore, I'm a fan of all things wrestling, they see Motor City Machine Guns and they're hype, right? This thing is hype to them. They finally made it. This is a lifelong dream. These guys are, they're saying things like, this is the greatest tag team of all time. This is your favorite tag team's favorite tag team, right? This, and I'm not taking away from that, right? And I can thoroughly see that, that argument that, okay, they influenced a lot of what we consider good tag team wrestling, like in today's wrestling, right? I'm not going to take away everything that they've done, right? So I 100% see that side of the perspective here, the spectrum of thought on them debuting. But at the same time, I understand the casual view as well. That is, I don't know who these guys are. Because personally, I'll get to my view personally on their debut here in a minute. Because a lot of the casual fans are either newer fans that really weren't watching anything outside of WWE at the time Motor City Machine Guns was doing their thing, or they just don't have a knowledge of who these guys are, and so they have a different perspective on this debut, right? And so I understand both sides of the coin here. Now, personally for me, I don't understand the hype. I fit in more of the casual fan base here, in that when Motor City Machine Guns was doing their thing in TNA, I wasn't watching wrestling at all, right? So I always say my sort of start date as being a fan of wrestling, sort of independently, but me choosing to like wrestling, was January 2014, right? And before that, I had a knowledge of WWE, right? Now I was born in 1997, right? So, and I don't have an acknowledgement, I don't have a recollection of ever knowing what a WCW was, right? We rarely watch wrestling. My dad watched Stone Cold and The Rock, and that was practically why he watched WWE, right? That Attitude Era, it fit with sort of that time that, and he watched for Stone Cold, right? When Stone Cold left, wrestling wasn't a thing my family participated in. I have very little memory of actually watching the show post like 2002, 2003. And so from that time, like, I played the video games, but my understanding of the wrestling business was WWE. That's when you said pro wrestling, I thought that was the only company, right? And so when I get back into it in 2014 as a fan of wrestling and start watching things from, watching documentaries about WCW and ECW and finding out what TNA, or at the time Impact, was, and the history with TNA, and seeing all these things, I don't have that recollection of watching it, and that sort of nostalgia doesn't appeal to me, right? Triple H is obviously booking for the fans of Motor City Machine Gun, to the wrestling fan, right? Whereas Vince more so booked towards, I don't want to say he booked for the casuals, but he booked to help the casuals understand things, right? There's a reason where like AJ Styles was a rarity when he debuted, that he was able to keep his name, and they used what he had built previously outside the company, because Vince Vince typically took wrestlers, changed everything about them so that he could create something new that was part of WWE, right? And so so this wasn't the first time I've ever seen these two guys wrestle, right? I've seen Alex Shelley. He had a very good singles run 2-3 years ago in Impact. Chris Sabin just recently came back to Impact. Their contract with Impact literally ended in like April, right? I'm pretty certain they were on one of the major beginning of the year pay-per-views for Impact, right? Or TNA, right? And so I don't hate that WWE brought them in. I think they did a good job. I think their presentation, their entrance was pretty cool. But that's about where I lost interest in them, because they got in the ring and they started doing that indie bullshit, right? They started doing that indie bullshit, right? Where they're pointing towards the crowd. You know, I think it was Alex Shelley who did this. I'm pretty sure Chris Sabin did it as well, where they set up like a hold. They had them by the neck, and they were getting ready to do like some sort of maneuver. But before the maneuver happened, they pointed to the crowd, put their hands on their ear, try to get the crowd hype, right? So that indie bullshit. And me, being a logical, rational person, understands that in a fight, if you hesitate and try to play to the crowd, I'm just gonna break the hold that you have me in. And so watching it, it just felt like they need some work to appeal to a more casual audience, right? I'm not giving up on them, because I think that there's something here for them to do. I think now, I'm not a big fan of them instantly getting thrown into like a number one contenders match to take on the tag champions. I feel like that's a little bit premature. And their match against DIY next week is going to be it's going to be a banger of a match. It's going to be a spectacle for sure, but it's going to be one of those matches that indie fans love. And I'm sitting here like trying to understand what's going on. Why is this happening? None of this makes any sense, right? And there'll be several big spots, and that'll be fine. I don't necessarily know if I will be cheering for the Motor City Machine Guns, right? At this point, I'm not sold yet. I'm willing to give it some time. I think a lot of it is also they're both in their 40s. I don't see this being like one of these long-term things, or it shouldn't be a long-term thing with that tag division. I also don't see a future of the tag division where the Bloodline lose the titles at any point until Jay and Jimmy come back as a tag team, which is what I believe they're going to do. And so I don't see the point of all of this happening. And so more than likely they'll beat DIY next Friday, and then they get fed to the Bloodline. And I'm not a big fan of doing that. I also don't like that, hey, we got this brand new debut. We're going to run 10 minutes worth of commercials during their match. And so I don't know. I don't know what they could have done to make the debut any better. I'm happy for Sabin and Shelley, because these are guys that are very influential in the tag team wrestling scene, and for them to finally get to WWE, I'm happy for them. Let them have that dream, but I don't necessarily know if there's a place for them on this roster of being in like the main event scene, and I don't necessarily know if there's a large enough people who care about them now that they debuted for them to be pushed, right? And I'm willing to wait this one out. I'll do what I always do with debuts. I'll give you a month or two, see, and let that thing work its course. Let time tell the tale. But from the debut, I'm not sold on it, right? I'm just not, right? I personally don't believe they're the greatest tag team of all time. Personally, to me, and I've said this before, I do believe that goes to the Usos. This is where I lean closer to the casual side than the hardcore side, because the casual argument to this is you can't be the best if you're not in the top company. What I will suggest to the casual crowd to hear me out on is some people don't necessarily view WWE as the goal, I think in this new generation of wrestling, some people want to run the indies. Some people want AEW freedom that they have. So I think we need to readjust the idea that WWE is the only pathway. That's the only goal people want. I think with AEW being here, I think that there's it's a reasonable thing to say that while AEW may not be the top company, they are a top. And I also think if we go back and look back at history of the business, if TNA had the funding in 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006 that AEW has right now, TNA was putting out some banger shit in its prime. It just didn't have the funding to get it out to a mainstream audience. And I think if it had that funding, I think that we could be having a different conversation as to the future of the business, with TNA quite possibly, leading the charge, because WWE struggled in the early 2010s. The whole 2010s was kind of a struggle for WWE in terms of viewership, that PG era. But even with parts of like the Ruthless Aggression era, there were things that TNA were doing that were quite entertaining. From like going back and looking at it, that I think that if they had funding similar to what AEW had, where they had a rich guy who was willing to put money into the company, I think TNA, I don't think they would have ever surpassed WWE, but I think we would have we would be having a conversation as to, was TNA number one at some point, right? I think as of right now, based on what has happened and what we know is right, WWE is clearly number one. I think we have to readjust what the pinnacle is, right? Because a lot of times people like to use sports arguments and say, well, WWE's, the NFL, and being the top guy in TNA is like being the top guy in arena football or the CFL. And I don't think that that's a fair comparison, because wrestling is not a sport. It is an entertainment aspect, right? And I think from that idea, I think there obviously WWE is more well known, but from an entertainment aspect, there are shows that are really good, who have really good actors on them, that are not well known. They don't have the big budgets behind them. So let me use, for example, the show. One of my favorite shows ever created was the show Manifest. It's now on Netflix. It was on NBC, and the reason it got canceled after 3 seasons from NBC was because the ratings for the show weren't necessarily what the network had hoped it was going to be. Part of that, I believe, was they didn't really market the show very well. That's just me personally. And I think the concept of the show was kind of weird to people, right? And so, but once it got on Netflix, I also think it was, a lot of people don't watch cable television a lot of times, right? So, but once it got on Netflix and it was introduced to a whole new section of people, more people started watching it. which is the only reason Netflix allowed a season 4 to be made. They were just going to take the 3 original seasons and just stream it. They then produced the season 4 to wrap up the show. And that was a show that I think had a very good acting, very good storytelling. Not a lot of people knew about it. Same thing with something like a Mr. Robot, was very niche and you had to be a fan of. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to watch the show because my favorite actor's in it, or right. And there's movies. I guarantee, I'm going to say this movie. I'm guaranteeing you. I'm about 95% confident no one listening to the show has seen this movie. It's a movie named Nefarious. It was in theaters. Very little marketing budget. And in very limited theaters at release date, and would be considered a sort of underground independent film. Wasn't made by a big Hollywood theater or director or studio. And this thing was in theater. It had a full release time. It came out on DVD. It sold fantastically. It's a very good movie. It's a very good movie. It's a very good movie. Very good acting. Not a lot of like the plot's very obvious. It's a very simple movie. I think simple is very good at times. But it does movie making very well, and I believe that if more people knew about it, right. And so the whole point that I'm trying to bring here is that TNA was very good and questionably the top brand in the wrestling world from like 2004 to like 2006, 7, 8, right? When WWE was struggling, TNA was doing their shit. So. And that was the time that Motor City Machine Guns were dominating TNA, right? And dominating the tag team scene and really creating something important there. And so I don't think that it's fair to say, well, if you never made it to WWE, you can't be the best. I don't think that's fair in the wrestling industry because there's so many people in the industry. Now, I'll say this. If you're the 60-70% of wrestlers who get into wrestling and never make it past the local indie scene, because that's a reality for a lot of wrestlers. The reality for a lot of wrestlers is a lot of them will get into it and they'll spend 20 years running the indies and gyms in front of 1,000 people for $500 a night, if that, and that's their life. That's the reality for, I would say, a majority of pro wrestlers, right? Very, very small minorities make it into what I would call the big four companies: New Japan, TNA, AEW, WWE, right? Very, very few wrestlers make it that far, right? But of those that make it that far, I don't think WWE is the dream for all of them. Especially with AEW being there, I think a lot of wrestlers now are recognizing that AEW offers something that WWE doesn't, and that's being non-exclusive. Meaning, I can go and run. Like, we had this conversation, I believe it was on Monday, or it could have been Friday. I think it was Friday. Had this conversation on the Friday post show for the Casual Wrestling Show. Like, is there an AEW wrestler who's happier in a better place now than he would be if he was in WWE? And I fully believe with all my heart, my answer was Jon Moxley. Because so I don't believe Jon Moxley fully left and didn't re-sign with WWE because he wanted to do hardcore stuff. But I think that was a reason. I think he had that itch to go back to his roots of the ZCW scene and doing some more hardcore style matches. But I also think he wanted the freedom of being Jon Moxley and running the independent scene and going to New Japan and running with some of these guys like Minoru Suzuki and Eddie Kingston, who are a little bit more gritty and not being so produced, right? And I'll be honest with you, I watched Collision last night. Jon Moxley and what they're doing, this little gimmick, this is something to watch AEW for. I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. I know I hate on AEW a lot. I'm about to do that in the next segment on the next topic. But this John Moxley, I don't know what the name of the group is called, but John Moxley, Claudio, Wheeler Yuta. I don't see what people find interesting about Yuta, but this might be that thing that makes the Wheeler Yuta interesting. I mean, Marina Shafir is a part of it, and Pac. This is an interesting little group of people, and they all have one thing in common, right? So outside of Wheeler Yuta, there's a couple things these guys have in common. They're all former WWE wrestlers. Pac, Claudio, Moxley, Marina Shafir was in NXT for a little bit. They're all former WWE wrestlers, and they're all people. Maybe so you take away Marina from this, Marina Shafir, and add in Wheeler to this next thing. They're all huge indie darlings in that they just want to wrestle, right? And so I think it's an unfair question, personally, to ask if they're in a better spot, because I think there's more important things than for some wrestlers. So for Moxley, the ability to do hardcore matches, run Japan, run the indies. For someone like Wheeler Yuta, who's not former WWE, but even still, someone like Claudio, for him to go out and just wrestle and do his thing and not have to worry about like being super produced to be sports entertainment, running the indies, being able to and now Claudio doesn't run the indies all that much. Personally, I don't see why any of AEW's top stars would want to run the indies, especially like Claudio. I'm sure Claudio's getting paid a pretty penny to be on AEW, right? And so I'm sure that's part of why he's so happy where he's at. But I also think like Claudio's being able to do things that he probably wouldn't be able to do in WWE, right? Moxley's able to go and run Japan, right? Someone like Ricochet is, he's the newest one who sort of, I guess, jumped ship from WWE to AEW. The ability to sort of just do his style of wrestling, I think, is a big reason why he chose to go to AEW. The ability to be around people who do the flippy shit, and while it may not be everyone's cup of tea, I think it's better suited for Ricochet. He was one of the ones here recently that if I knew that probably would jump ship, and I'm okay with them doing it. Right? So, back to sort of Motor City Machine Guns, not a big fan of their debut. I thought the entrance, the presentation was pretty okay, was the best part. But once they got into the ring, you lost me with that indie shit, right? And so if they could tone that down, I'm happy for them, right? They finally made it to WWE. I don't necessarily want to say that this is the pinnacle, though, right? Because a lot of casual fans will come in and say, well, if you've never made it to WWE, you can't be the best at something. I'm willing to listen to an argument as to why these two are the best tag team of all time. I don't believe it. My belief is it's the Usos, personally, and it's not because they're just in WWE. I just think from a overall perspective in wrestling, the Usos have so much influence to me as a fan, right? I think a lot of these greatest lists have to do with like when I was watching as well. Like, so like my it may just be because when I first got into wrestling, back into wrestling, where I would consider like me being a wrestling fan for myself in 2014, the Usos were still being where they were a tag team. The colored pants with the tribal paint on the face, and they were my favorites then, right? And over the last 10 years, through all their character evolution, they've still been my favorite tag team since I've been a fan, right? Now American Made is, but if the Usos got back together real quickly, they would become on par one of my favorite tag teams in the business. I just the chemistry they have, the ability for them to just be a sports entertainer, I love it, right? And so to me, it's the Usos. Next would be New Day, and then I'm willing to take arguments for other groups, right? Saying like best of all time is very hard because tag team wrestling on a territory scene used to be something like WWE has never truly really taken traditional tag team wrestling seriously, right? Like we talk about the Hardys and the Dudleys and Edge and Christian, but that's not necessarily traditional tag team wrestling, right? And I've said this before, and I'll say it again: Edge, Christian, the Hardys, and the Dudley Boys are remembered so well as a tag team because of the TLC matches and the extreme shit that they would do at the time when that was popular. I don't necessarily think if we took that and put it into today's wrestling, it wouldn't work. And so I think they're remembered for nostalgia. So I don't have them in the top 5. Right? If I had to rank my top tag teams, Usos, the New Day, definitely 1 and 2. I think you have to put Legion of Doom in the top 5. You have to put, as much as I don't like Bret Hart, and I know Wavy D is going to sit here and say Bret Hart's overrated. I don't think Bret Hart's overrated. I don't think he's as good as the IWC says he is, but I don't think he's underrated. And I definitely think the Hart Foundation was a really good tag team. Evolution, that's more of a faction, but I'll put them on this list. And I think because I'm including faction, because technically New Day's a faction, let's take out the factions. Let's take out New Day was a tag team because for the most part they ran tag team action. It wasn't like considered a faction, right? So the Usos, New Day, Legion of Doom, the Hart Foundation with Bret and Jim Neidhart, and then number 5. There's arguments for number 5. I'm trying to sit here and think of like his tag teams that we could put on this list. I'm sure there's some, but you get the point, right? Am I gonna put? There's a lot of tag teams that I've enjoyed. Going back and watching some TNA stuff. The Wolves, Motor City Machine Gun was good. Aces and Eights, was that the name? I liked them. Beer Money was a really good tag team in TNA, right? TNA had some good shit, right? So I think just because you haven't watched it is what I guess that's the point. The point that I want to make to the casual fans, just because you never watched it and don't know of it doesn't mean that it wasn't good or great, right? Prime TNA was a great program, right? And this is always been my point. Just because you're casual doesn't mean that you can't go back and educate yourself on the history of the business, right? So if you have $9.99 to spare, go watch some old TNA. Get TNA Plus. Go back and watch some old TNA, right? I think it's well worth it, right? And then for the hardcore fans, can we settle this down a little bit? Then the last thing I want to say about this was there's the casual fan base. I've seen, and it's not necessarily just casuals, but the fan base who typically the casuals plus. So I'm not saying that this is what casuals do, but there's a faction of IWC members who are WWE fans and love the shit on anything not WWE. And so when Motor City Machine Guns comes out and on TV, the pop wasn't all that loud. And I hate that I have to continue to explain this. Because this goes back also to like the bad blood thing that, and I'm not saying Wavy D is one of these people. I understand what his critique was because the crowd wasn't necessarily loud on TV at Bad Blood. But I think people need to recognize, and I've been trying to convey this every time someone mentions that the crowd's not super loud. I always like to convey that they turn the gain down on the microphones in the crowd. There's microphones everywhere, and they turn the gain down for several reasons, right? And so, like, I have a person in a wrestling group that I thoroughly trust. He goes to a lot of wrestling events. I trust his knowledge of wrestling, but I also don't think he would just straight up lie, right? And this guy said he was in the arena. The pop was actually really loud, and at several times during the match, there were random chants of Motor City, right? Just like you would expect that there would be, right? And so I've always said, don't let the crowd dictate how you personally feel about the thing, because WWE does a lot to manipulate the crowd noise, right? Whether it's turning the mics completely off, turning down the microphones to where it doesn't pick up everything, or and so I'm not sitting here saying that maybe that we should just cheer for them. If you don't like them, you don't like them. But what I am saying is, don't throw them away because the TV pop didn't seem as loud. Because it's definitely much louder in the arenas. As someone who has sat beside one of the crowd mics before, I can tell you there's crowd mics everywhere, probably more than they've ever had in an arena. There's crowd mics everywhere. They just have to turn the gain down because with so many mics in the crowd, they don't want to pick up random conversations. They don't want to pick up random chants that aren't, going around. If you've ever been to a live wrestling show, people try to start chants all the time, right? And so they turn the gains down. And that's 100% what I believe this was. They turned the gains down, but the pop was louder than the TV portrayed. And so for the casual fans, don't throw these guys away yet. Because I believe that if you actually went back and watched what they could do, if you could sort of overlook the indie AEW style that they have, if you could somehow, overlook that, they're a very good tag team, and they could still go at even in the 40s that they are in. Like, their age, I don't think it's not a factor. They could still go. But to the hardcore fans, don't give the casual fans a hard time who don't see the importance of this team. Right, so in essence, to the casual fan, just because you've never watched it doesn't mean it's not good. To the hardcore fan, just because you have watched it doesn't mean it's as good as you think it is. Right, and so I think there needs to be a balance in how we view this. It's their debut. Give it a few more weeks, and let's see where this plays out. All right, next topic. Brian Alvarez, which I'll just straight up say this. I'm not a fan of Alvarez, not a fan of Meltzer, not a fan of SRS. I don't even see what SRS says anymore because the little pussy got me blocked. Right? I could give two actual fucks about Sean Ross Sapp. I think he's soft. When I sit here and I talk about 2 weeks ago the IWC being soft, he's the guy. Like, you look in the definition of SAWFT, soft, you got Brian Alvarez, or excuse me, you got Sean Ross Sapp, right? I don't like Meltzer and Alvarez because they think that because they've been doing this as quote unquote journalists since the 80s and 90s, that they're like some end all be all of wrestling opinion, and a lot of times they're wrong. Those are kind of the big three. Now, I will say with Sean Ross Sapp, as a journalist, he tends to be a little bit more thorough and correct in his reporting, so I will listen to Fightful. As a person, I just don't like Sean Ross Sapp. I think he's too much of a mark for me to respect his opinion, right? And then a lot of these other wrestling journalists, again, with the loosest definition of journalists ever, that run their own websites, that have very little of knowledge of anything and how things work. They just post opinion pieces. I don't listen to you, right? But with that being said, Brian Alvarez, who's a well-respected like member of the IWC, right? He has his own podcast. I think he does one with Dave as well. He comes out, and I'm not going to quote exactly what he said, but essentially it appears he's finally flipping on AEW, right? And he comes out and basically says that Tony Khan needs to stop booking for the quote-unquote sickos, because, right, it essentially limits the audience, right, to a very small niche of a niche industry, right? Which is what me, Nerdy D, Wavy D, the casual community have been speaking and saying for the last year plus, right? You gotta stop booking for the fans that will watch your product no matter what, right? You limit how many people watch the show, right? And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but AEW, your show, like I said, I watched Collision last night. I wanted to check it out a little bit, right? And Battle of the Belts. Really long 3 hours of wrestling. Not everything was good. Certain points were, Anna Jay and Mariah May put on a really, really good main event of Battle of the Belts. Very good match. Kind of new, I'm not one of those fans that say that wrestling being predictable is bad. I think wrestling needs to be predictable. Because that's what makes a good TV show. When you can predict something or where you can play along with it and say, well, this is going to happen, it keeps you engaged, right? Now, so I knew exactly what was going to happen. That Anna was going to win. Anna Jay then, therefore, because she pinned the champion, gets a title match. I do like that AEW does. I think they're called like qualifier matches or something like that. I don't know the actual terminology AEW uses. But instead of like they'll give like someone a random match against the champion, and if they pin them, they then get a championship match. I like that. I like that idea. I think that's a very good idea, right? It keeps the champion wrestling, but it also creates this idea that, this next person, and I do like Anna Jay. I think she's very well progressed over the last 2 to 3 years. And I don't think she beats Mariah May, but I do like that she's getting a title opportunity. They're also going, they're really putting a lot of emphasis on the show November the 6th, because it's going to be the show that AEW has to go face to face with NXT again, with NXT running Wednesday, November 6th instead of Tuesday, November 5th. And seeing that we are getting closer to that date, let me just go ahead and announce to the world, November 5th is Tuesday, November 5th. There will be no show that day. That is Election Day here in the United States. I personally don't care who you vote for. I urge everyone to vote. Well, actually, this is the last topic we're going to talk about in a minute here. Something about this that's making the rounds around the IWC that I really just need to rant about real quick. But I urge everyone who's a legal citizen of the United States, who's eligible to vote, who's registered to vote, go vote. I don't care who you vote for. That's not as a host of a wrestling podcast, that's not my concern. I don't care who you vote for. Right? That's between you and yourself, right? And I wish that as a culture we can get back to that, because that's how voting used to be, where, right? And again, we'll talk about that here in a minute. But with November 5th being Election Day, I do think, well, me personally, I won't be available to record. I take politics, that's outside of wrestling, my next biggest passion is politics, right? And so I will be watching Election Day coverage, if not possibly working the polls. And I don't know. I haven't been contacted by my precinct yet to see if they need me to work. But if I do end up doing that, that'll be the official reason. But just in case, and even if I don't have to work the polls, I don't do anything on election night. Election result night, I don't do anything. I sit there, I watch coverage. This is like, I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit of a politic nerd. Election night is sort of like the Super Bowl to me. And so there will be no show on November 5th. That I'll also say there will be no show that week at all, November 8th as well. I will be very busy that day. It's one of my days off, but I'm going to a concert that day, and I got, things to plan for and other things like that, right? So definitely no shows that week. That's 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away. Yeah, so I guess to sort of update the schedule, we'll have an episode on Tuesday the 22nd and Wednesday the 23rd. Again, because I'm off on Wednesday instead of Friday this upcoming week. So you'll get 2 episodes next week with the 22nd and the 23rd. You'll then get an episode on Tuesday the 29th and Friday the 1st of November. And then the week after that will be the week after that will end up becoming a week off with no episode on the 5th, no episode on the 8th. We'll be back on the 12th. And I'll remind everyone about that. But just so you guys know. So let's go into this last topic, since I sort of brought it up. Don't really care about what the dirt sheets have to say. Don't listen to them. But I do find it interesting that the dirt sheets are finally sort of saying what the casual fans have been saying, is you got to stop booking to these hardcore sickos and only booking and then booking for a more broad audience that will allow casual fans to come watch your program. I will say they got some interesting stuff on AEW with the whole Moxley crew. I'm done with Jack Perry and I'm done with the Young Bucks and all of that. Don't give a fuck about them. But I think the Moxley thing would be what I go to watch for if I end up watching AEW. That's just me. But let's talk about this last topic. And it does sort of play into the political avenue. So I want to preface it with this notion. I personally do not care. As a wrestling podcast host, I'm willing to talk about certain topics, and I more so don't self-censor, so I will say what I feel. I just don't think it's best for business to bring politics into wrestling, right? With that being said, this is a topic that I really need to talk about. So I preface it with this. I personally do not care which political candidate you support or don't support. Like I've already said previously, just a couple minutes ago, I do urge everyone to participate as citizens of the United States, because that is, I believe it's a civil duty, but it's also like the entire way our government works, right? Again, I have a history degree, or part of a history degree. I never fully finished college, but that was what I was in school for. I dropped out with like 2 semesters left of school, just for personal reasons. But history is one of my favorite things, right? Our government is representative republic. No matter how much they want to spew on either side that, we're a democracy, we're not. We're a representative republic. We elect people to represent us. They work for us, right? And so the only way we can get, the way our government was set up to work was it was for the people, by the people, of the people, meaning the people have to be citizens and elect people to represent them, right? We're not a democracy. We're a representative republic. And so it is I believe, your civil duty as a citizen of the United States to register to vote and to actually vote in the elections. That is your civic duty as a citizen. Now, with that being said, the only thing the only thing that I will say is you should vote. Who you vote for, what you vote, the reasoning you vote for somebody, I personally don't give a fuck. And so this comes in with, there's a video I believe released late Friday night or sometime Saturday afternoon of Undertaker and Kane in a ad for Donald Trump, and basically saying, you know, we support him, and therefore we urge you to vote for him, right? And first off, I thought the ad was very well done, personally. I thought it was funny. I think for wrestling fans, it was kind of cool. And so my first statement is, everyone's so up in arms that these wrestlers are conservative or Republican. I hate to break it to the fan base. While the fan base of wrestling is, well, majority liberal, the actual wrestlers themselves, I'm willing to bet, are at least 60% Republican, conservative. I'm willing to bet that 60%, if not more, of the wrestlers, especially from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but definitely even today, I'm willing to bet there's a lot more conservative wrestlers that just don't necessarily speak out about it on their platform. Now, personally, that's how I believe this should be, right? Now, Kane and Undertaker are no longer representatives of the WWE. Therefore, I believe they can say whatever the hell they want to say because they do not represent the company. Just because they're on Legends contracts. So all the Legends contract is essentially is you can, because RVD explained this. This is the reason why RVD could be on Legends contract with WWE but still show up in AEW, because all the Legends contract essentially does is give WWE exclusive rights to your merchandise and putting like your image in a video game. So like RVD can never be in the AEW video game, but he could show up on AEW television. They could never make merch for RVD to sell for AEW because WWE owns that, right? And so my point of view is this. They don't represent the company. Therefore, they could say whatever, they can endorse whoever they want. Now, personally, I do believe that outside of being on TV, even if they were part of the company, they could say whatever they want. That's just right. That's how free speech works. I do believe once you get on the clock, you do have rules that companies require you to abide by. And this is what I got canceled for. Again, I talk about the IWC being soft, and it's not that I'm speaking out of my ass. I'm speaking out of experience. A year and a half ago, I essentially get canceled on TikTok because I speak up and say, you know, this was prior to the Jack Perry shit with CM Punk. CM Punk's in the ring at a show, and the show is done. As far as being on TV, CM Punk's in the ring. He's walking around. He sees a sign. He brings the sign into the ring, and he holds it up for the whole crowd to see. And the sign, what's the message on the sign is completely pointless. Right? So we're not going to go into that topic. It's completely pointless what's on the sign. It was a very progressive, liberal sign, right? And my entire response to the person who posted this was that there were 2 points that I made. The first was that Tony Khan should be very upset that CM Punk did this because this alienates his audience, or has the potential of alienating potential viewers or current viewers of the product. And therefore, from a business perspective, there's a reason why political shit doesn't, like, messaging don't happen on WWE, right? Wrestlers aren't walking down with political messages on their shirts or holding up signs or any of that shit, right? There's a reason for that. Because there's a potentiality of alienating a current audience of that product, right? So that was the first point that I made, that CM Punk made a political message on the clock, and that should go against company policy. The second thing that I made the point was that if that y'all are praising CM Punk for doing this because he's a little bit more liberal, but if someone like Drake Wirtz, former NXT referee, or Jackson Riker, or Glenn Jacobs, Kane, came into the ring holding up a conservative sign that promoted conservatism or some sort of Republican ideal or candidate, y'all would completely try to cancel him. You would not be doing the same thing. These IWC fans are hypocrites. That's all I said. And I got canceled for saying, oh, you don't support this, you don't support it. Now, I will admit, I'll take responsibility. And I've learned this over time, that I just need to stop replying to haters who try to, respond to my shit. And right, I got to stop giving them ammo to fire back at me. Sure, that's fine. I'm very passionate about what I believe in, but this video goes around, and everyone and their mama starts posting reply videos about how I'm this and that. They don't know jack shit about me. But all I said was, political statements shouldn't be made by current employees of companies while on the clock, right? If I made a political message while I was on the clock, my company would fire me. And I believe that the wrestling should be the same, right? And so Kane and Undertaker are not current employees of the WWE. In fact, Kane is the current Republican mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. I don't know what kind of expectation you had for Kane, but obviously he was going to support the Republican nominee. Right, and I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of old-time, your favorite wrestlers from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and probably even a majority of the wrestlers today, probably are a little bit more conservative. Right, and so my whole point is this, and I've there have been a couple creators I've never heard of on X that their comments on this idea have popped into my timeline, my algorithm on X, and it's sort of restored my faith that maybe there's some common sense people even within the IWC that made my point for me. I don't have to like your political beliefs to cheer for you as a character. If you don't have the mental capacity to separate the character from the person playing the character, just stop watching wrestling. But also, you don't have to like the dude to watch or recognize his legacy. You don't have to like Undertaker's policy or political point of view to understand that he's a legend in the game. Like, in the same way where I don't like Dave Batista's political point of view. Just personally, I think personally that he's sold out to Hollywood, that he's just going to say whatever they tell him to do so that he can keep his job. That's how I feel about Batista. Don't necessarily care about anything that he has to say. He posted a whole video shitting on Trump, and if you agree with him on that, that's your prerogative. But if you like, I don't like Batista. I didn't like that video. I thought it was completely pointless, stupid. But I'll also say this: I've already voted. I early voted. Donald Trump wasn't the person I voted for. I'll go out and straight up say that on this podcast. I didn't, but I also didn't vote for the Democrat. I didn't vote for Kamala Harris either. Right? And who I voted for is completely between me. But I'll straight up say this: I'm not one of these people that are like sucking off either of the candidates, right? So I don't necessarily personally agree with Kane and Undertaker's endorsement of Donald Trump. But they have the right to make whatever they want. decision that they want and endorse whoever the hell they want and campaign with whoever the hell they want. And if you can't distinguish between real and fake, between character and person, right? I don't necessarily like Dave Bautista's politics, but he was a pretty good wrestler. He's a pretty good actor, right? And if you can't distinguish, and that goes for both people, whether it's the hardcore liberals or the hardcore conservatives, because there are a lot of hardcore conservatives who are doing the same thing to Batista that the liberals are doing to Undertaker. If you let a celebrity's political opinion affect your lifestyle, straight up just going to say this, or your opinion on anything, you're a moron. There's not a celebrity on the planet, Taylor Swift, R. Kelly, Diddy, Eminem, Undertaker, and The Rock. There's not a celebrity on the planet that will change my political point of view on anything. Because I believe once you get to a certain level of celebrity, you don't understand the common folk. You don't understand why I'm voting for who I'm voting for if you're a celebrity. And a lot of times you're bought and paid for, and so I'm not going to listen to you anyway. Right? And so this is my entire argument with this. The IWC wants to cancel Kane and Undertaker and completely forget about everything that they had done for this industry. And I think that that's fucking insane. That's fucking insane, dude. And I love seeing all these people. I'm not a hardcore, like, MAGA Trump guy, right? I'll be straight up honest with you. I'm more moderate conservative, right? I'm your standard, like, conservative, right? But I love to see these guys that have been in the industry, someone like Justin Credible, who have come out and showed support to Kane and Undertaker and saying, if you don't agree with them, that's fine, but you're not going to erase their legacy. And that's where I'm at. You're not going to sit here and erase Hulk Hogan's legacy. You're not going to sit here and erase the Undertaker or Kane's legacy because they differ from your political point of view. And if you're one of those people in the IWC that want to get rid of Hogan or Kane or Undertaker, or hell, even if you're a conservative trying to get rid of Batista's legacy, you're fucking, I'm going to say it, you're fucking retarded. It's moronic. And it's anti-free speech. And that is one thing. I'm very pro-free speech. Right? I'm not worried about getting canceled. I don't self-censor. None of that shit affects me, right? And so that's my take on this, right? I don't care who you vote for. I don't care who you support. At the end of the day, that should be a decision between you and yourself. And if you have any other higher power that, you know, like for me, I vote based on like what policy and there are certain issues that I have that are very important to me. And that's a decision between me and myself and God. Right, because I do believe that I am somewhat religious, so my religion does play a little bit into my politics, and that's a decision between me, myself, and God. Right, and it should be the same way for you. And if you don't worship a God, that's a whole different topic. It's between yourself. I don't understand where we as a culture have gotten to a place where we've gotten so brash and so divided over who someone votes for. I have liberal friends. I have conservative friends. I have a lot more conservative friends than liberal friends, I'll admit. But I have super hardcore, like, Trump supporter friends that I disagree with a lot on, right? And we're still friends. We still hang out. Right? We don't let politics differ between our friendship. I also have friends that are super liberal. Same thing, right? I can hang out with anyone. I'm not going to let your politics dictate how I live my life and if I can be friends with you or not. I think that's moronic. But I'm also not going to allow you guys to, like, I don't know. I just think cancel culture is dumb. It's stupid. And trying to erase the legacy of Kane and Undertaker over who they like politically is dumb. It's really dumb. It's really dumb. You don't have to like their opinion. But here's how free speech works. Here's how free speech works, and this is how we'll end the show. Here's how free speech works. You have the right to speak. I have a right to disagree. Let's flip that around. I have a right to speak. You have a right to disagree. That's how free speech works. And we can have conversations about that. But that, I have the right to not listen to you, right? And just keep scrolling. Remember, the IWC and I've noticed this in our culture. We have a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum that'll sit here, and if you don't agree exactly as I believe, I can't be with you. I can't be involved, or I can't be, I can't hang out with you. I can't be a fan of yours. And that's no way to live, man. That's no way to live. And so my message to the IWC here is, I need to grow up a little bit into the real world and understand not everyone's going to agree with you. The problem is social media has allowed us to sort of live in our little echo chambers, that when someone comes in and disrupts that, it triggers some people. Y'all got to get out of your echo chamber. Y'all got to get into the real world and understand not everyone's going to be your friend. Not everyone's going to agree with you, and some people will disagree with what you got to say. And that's fine. We can move on, live like adults, and just agree to disagree on certain issues. Right? But this is that special episode, y'all. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And until next time, I'll see you all on Tuesday with Wavy D as we break down Raw and jump into the next round of Thirsty Tuesday. But until then, I will see you all on the next episode. Have a great rest of your weekend.
So hit that subscribe, come along for the ride. AEW, WWE, we're always on side. From fantasy booking to baddies that slay, slapping meat wrestling every Tuesday.